Well, I've just checked out our private chat here, and Dustin of the band Wisteria Lodge, howdy to you as well. How are you doing there tonight?
Hey, very good. Thanks very much for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thank you again for sending me a preview copy of your new album, which I've only had a chance to really listen to one time, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um, so it's not like I'm an expert, but um, I would say that people have got certain, at the moment, I'll call them unspoken secrets in terms of what is ahead for them, but uh, which I think builds on sort of the Twin Peaks story. Then this will be an ideal present for them, and just don't think about it, don't plan it or anything. Just every day, if you're going to give yourself a present, this would be an ideal one of those. And you could listen to maybe a track a day, who knows. And it's, I mean, how many tracks are there on it? Literally about 16.
yes,
Or
16.
and it's each of those tracks, every one is not literally a ballad with somebody singing on it necessarily. They're sort of, they go one by one with a certain, almost like a story, with certain spoken aspects, literally, like the title of the album. And it started off with the J.R. Starr intro in the Roadhouse, introducing Wisteria Lodge. And then there is actually a track later with Kimmy Robertson on it, but having only listened to it once, I was wondering if her voice in it and everything was, whether I was quite hearing it properly or something. I don't know, but that's again something that people, probably a bit of a mystery there. Maybe you could mention anything about it. I don't know.
Yeah, so I could illuminate a bit of the mystery. Kimmy's actually been on a couple podcasts and told this story, but it's actually a really beautiful story. We were working on collaborating on this album, and we're working on some future stuff. And she was at a vocal retreat with some other voice artists, and there was a woman with a harp. And Kimmy wanted to make some noises, some sounds that I could then manipulate in the studio. And so she said, "Hey, can I borrow your harp?" And this harpist was like, "I can play any scale, any chord, any melody. Just tell me and I will play it." And Kimmy's like, "No, no, no, you don't understand." And she held the harp, and the wind started playing the harp. And if you know anything about the wind and Twin Peaks, that's pretty important. So Kimmy immediately stopped everything she was doing, grabbed her phone, and pressed record, and the wind played the harp. And the file that I got back, if you know anything about like wind blowing into microphones, that kind of creates a pretty distorted, bassy tone. And so what you hear as the bass is the wind. And what you hear in the high register is the harp being played by the wind. And if you're a Twin Peaks fan, you're familiar with there's beautiful music in the air and the birds always sing a pretty song. So this is the wind quite literally making beautiful music in the air. And if you listen closely, you can hear birds that are then modulated in and played with as well.
Well, it's just one track on a very, that gives a, I was going to say a new spin. That sounds like I'm some kind of old 80s radio disc jockey in the UK, but I think more, like, you're definitely bringing something to the Twin Peaks world that's not been um, expressed so much before. I've heard in certain synth pop type, bands, etc. That I remember before Twin Peaks: The Return came out, for instance, there was this one particular track by the band You Say Party, We Say Die. They called themselves. I don't really know much about the band, but they actually, one of their members sadly passed away, and they omitted the "We Say Die" part to the band because probably trying to be a bit more, just didn't seem quite right. And if you watch the video, you can actually see that band member who sadly died. And, he's on at the start of the video speaking backwards in true Twin Peaks style. And the video is probably one of the most, it's called Laura Palmer's Prom, and it's one of the most sort of true to Twin Peaks recreations of how the show and film felt, I would say, in a music video. But at the same time, there's still something always, slightly off about it, where it's very difficult to recapture anything like that. And you always, it's certainly, if people are slavishly kind of trying to do it, that's almost setting themselves up for a failure. But it's certainly, an interesting thing they did there. And then, of course, when the feeling I got from, for instance, the Chromatics is that they were sort of almost like a Twin Peaks hipster studio band. And I'm not trying to use hipster in a bad way. I'm just saying very knowingly using the 80s sound and everything of synths, etc., which was, of course, the Julie Cruz trademark in part. But, right from the off, I felt like the way Lynch used Chromatic's song Shadow in the sort of pilot long episode, start of The Return, it was almost like knowing nod to the past, but without necessarily fully be going back to that, of course. And it's like, I think Lynch was not trying, he's not, I don't think he's trying to be meta or things like this that people say, that he was trying to sort of mock anything to do with Twin Peaks. But I think there was an element where it felt knowing to some degree, as in, this is something that's made inspired by Twin Peaks almost, and then here it is in Twin Peaks, which is a very uncanny feeling, and that's like the perfect feeling for The Return in a way.
Yeah, I don't know how much you follow Twin Perfect's explanation of Twin Peaks, but they go.
That's a good thing to bring up, I must say.
They go really deep on that song, and
I would get quite angered by him, to be honest. But in the past, I was.
Right. I think he talks about that. I think that Johnny Jewel had a connection with Lynch. And so it was that whole thing of, we don't know how many years they were having this conversation. There's talk of, I've read recent interviews with Christabel when she was talking about Lynch, and they'd worked on a couple records, and it was, they were doing music. And then all of a sudden he's like, I have a project that I might be able to fit you into. And all of a sudden then she's a Blue Rose agent. So like it's incredible that first of all, it's impossible also to embody or encompass or reinterpret what we all know is like almost a holy document. This was cinematography on television. Like, so we're ripping apart two worlds there, and we're trying to make sense of it. This guy's giving us keys to transcendental meditation in a soap opera. It changed history, it changed TV forever. And I think, I don't know if The Return is our dream, like Twin Perfect would like to believe, or if it is season 3, or if it's its own thing and it's special, or if it changed the timeline. But that's the fun of Twin Peaks, is that we get to not only discuss infinitely, and that no one thing is guaranteed to be right, but that we all, to our own degree, and this is kind of what the Chromatics and everybody in between, Shoo, many different bands, and people, we love that vibe. We want to go have our cherry pie. We want to get lost in the Red Room, some of us, and in any way we can, whether it be a pilgrimage to the Double R, to Tweeds in North Bend, or the Palmer House with Mary Reber, hanging out and having a tour there. It's very special to a lot of people. And I think musicians and artists, there's no doubt that Badalamenti, Cruz, and Lynch had a real impact in the 90s, because in the 80s and the 90s, the resurgence of oldies came back. And so they gave us oldies, but with a twist, a darkness, something that was hidden, and you had to go out of your way to listen and look closely. And thank God, because again, we get people like the Chromatics and Johnny Jewel that were heavily steeped in it, and they then present this new taste for us. The Return is personally going to be more of my favorite. The show has every aspect of greatness, as including Fire Walk with Me and the Missing Pieces. But when it came to developing this project, it was the return had the biggest impact. We were writing songs when we were listening to when we were watching season 1, but when we saw real bands entering into this world, entering into this dream, we wanted to enter into that dream. And so we had to dream, what would a band be like that lives in Twin Peaks, or that is on the road and gets caught up in the Twin Peaks shenanigans? What would it look like? What would it sound like? And how do we do that without a direct copy? Because there are a lot of great bands that do Lynch music or Badalamenti music, and that's great. But we aren't a cover band. We want to be completely original, but we want people to be able to recognize when they look at us. Like, it's not like some metal band, well, where'd you get your influence? Well, can't you tell? Metallica. Well, yes, everybody's wearing black and you have a flying V, but I couldn't tell, right? When you look at us, if you watched or have been around the popular zeitgeist in the past 30 years, you might not have ever seen Twin Peaks. But if you see the Red Room, you see the chevron floor, you see people in like official looking clothing, timeless question mark. We're playing with archetypes just like Lynch was, and thank goodness that he did, because it gave us permission to pursue some of the hardest questions: loss, love, respect, and decency. It's been absolutely beautiful and strange on this journey.
Well, I think, yeah, in terms of respect and decency and that kind of thing, for me, I've always, in terms of just trying to look at Twin Peaks online and everything and be a part of what is, the community as such. But I mean, I would say there's lots and lots of different sort of villages or people within that community. Like, I certainly don't see myself as belonging to the same community as Twin Perfect, where I'm going to, I've studied film. I went up to doing a master's. So you would think it would surely be within my capability to make a 4.5 hour video about what I think about Twin Peaks or something. And he didn't really mention the return very much, as far as I recall. But my main issue with him was just the way in which he seemed disingenuous, like as if this is his sort of school project. And I just didn't warm much to him as a person. Like, I'm not saying I experienced pure hatred of him or something, like, but I mean, yes, sometimes, but I overcame that. And then it's just like, that's the point of transcendental meditation is so, but with him, he was obviously doing it to try and gain traction, because that guy had done other things online, which some people had said he'd nearly driven one of the makers of Silent Hill to nigh on suicide, which it might sound funny to some people, but if that's the case, then I don't view him as particularly a showing decorum and civilized behavior and sort of decency, what you're describing as perhaps things which were evident in the town of Twin Peaks and Twin, Cooper, etc. I've got no interest in the idea of gaining popularity. Like, if I was getting 2,000 views for every video or more, ideally, fantastic. But I'm not doing it to try and benefit off of that for myself and to try and in some way gain from it, get like millions of views explaining Twin Peaks, because just that idea of that is very childlike. It's like something a 10-year-old would do. Here's Twin Peaks explained. Like, surely if you don't understand Twin Peaks, why are you even watching it in the first place? It's about emotional reaction to things. And I was even thinking of this before the video. Like, I could probably make a 4.5 hour video of me describing an in-depth, really, like, possibly you could say emotionally incredibly self-indulgent video about going to see David Lynch, The Art Life, the documentary, in Birmingham in 2017. And the guy I went with, Neil, I followed him sort of afterwards online, and now I don't exactly know specifically what happened. He had a health problem. He's no longer with us. And so I remember going with him and everything. and the experience of that, and meeting someone who's a really keen fan, and then the fact that they're no longer around, this kind of thing just, as much as it might be self-indulgent for me, because after all, I only met him once properly, but I spoke to him a lot online. It's just so much of a thing to do with Twin Peaks. As in, when I was at school, when I was young, I had somebody, like my best pal at school, die, and then just after that, that's when Twin Peaks was on. And so, however you might look at this from a psychological viewpoint, and whether it was even healthy, I was just so mired in that world of essentially like the aftermath, the afterglow of losing somebody, and that's what I saw as a big part of Twin Peaks. And I think that aspect of what you're talking about, decency and all this kind of thing, I think, like with Twin Peaks: The Return, there's definitely a big element of depicting the kind of thing, depression as well, and the after effects of not only the loss of Laura, obviously, but partly that, but just the way the town had gone, and just everything to do. I mean, it obviously was stemming from Cooper and people like this, just the immeasurable effect, really, of what the original show depicted. And I don't think what it realistically shows is that you can't just get over these things, if ever. I'm not saying that I don't think that Lynch wants that to be the end of Twin Peaks, but that's sort of one possible outcome at this point. Like, I'm sure there could be an entirely optimistic side to things as well, like the golden age or whatever Lynch might call it. But see, like with the music and the musical choices and, reversed and slowed down Muddy Magnolias, for instance, like that's about quite far removed from the original Julie Cruz. And then I don't think it's an accident that when Julie Cruz is actually in the show, her performance is almost curtailed, So, and that's all about Twin Peaks to me. It's about this emotional fallout from events, that we all have to experience. It's not just me. It's not just, someone in Romania who saw Twin Peaks. I used to be in a relationship with someone from Romania, who now lived in this country, and she said when Twin Peaks was back on then, we'd all be rushing to the TV, and it was like, this is the best thing on TV. The original series. And
I mean, I kind of I've tried to look at Twin Peaks like a religion, that it is something different to everybody, and that it has healing power. I mean, I don't know if you heard about Paul McCartney, but he had set up to put on a performance, and the Queen was like, yeah, that's great that you're set up, but I'm going to go watch Twin Peaks. So like, I think, again, it was a phenomenon. It changed everything for a lot of people. And as far as, being removed or anything like that, again, I think it was fair to attempt to change and grow. But I think what really, there is no definition. Like, that's unfair. What is Twin Peaks? Like, we're all still trying to figure it out. And that's the point. I guess there's a mystery. But I think if we really want to put a word on it, not that I'm a psychologist or anything, but trauma is a real mean thing. It sucks. It's darkness. It's hard. And some of us don't have the tools to work through it. And that is evidenced, I would say, in The Return pretty heavily. And that what you were talking about, what has changed in 25 years? What trauma has been dealt with? ? Have the people in the sheriff's station like really processed the weirdness? What about the kids that are doing drugs and living in a trailer park? Is this better or worse than the 90s? There's a lot being said, and I think especially Lynch is really smart, and he's kind of pointing to things, quite honestly, multiple times. If in the original he's pointing to the camera, the handheld camera, shining light on it, he's shining light on the cell phone when Lucy loses her mind over the cell phone situation. So I think there is a whole, like, I'm putting the light on, whether it be your archetype of America or your white knight, your belief in faith. And I think and Twin Peaks is kind of a lens that you choose to view the world through after you've consumed it. Because it's just like, maybe you watch a Disney film and there's a hero and they overcome something and that inspires you. Well, Twin Peaks is not an easy journey. It's not for everybody. And if you can't get past the first 3 episodes of the first season, don't worry. It's okay. It wasn't for you. But if at the end of that first 3 episodes, you are staying up and continuously watching, you have found your show. You don't know it yet. You have things to process, and the show is for you. And it's fantastic. And it did this person intentionally create this quantum piece of art that was meant to change, shape, heal. Maybe not. Maybe it was just a guy who caught the rabbit by the tail. But I think based on what we have with interviews, we know that he's really into intuition, right? The Red Room came from thin air by putting his hand on top of a car. This guy proved that you can dream your reality, and he's putting it into TV, into a film, if you will. And again, it's just, we have it wrapped in plastic in this procedural bit of a drama. But I think we all were captivated, and it wasn't one person. It was the whole thing of like, it takes a village, and like Twin Peaks is kind of your village when you're in a dark place. I feel like witnessing these people going through their BS, their trials and tribulations, whether it be love triangles, death of a loved one, thinking that you've gained something new only for it to be BS. I think all of these things are part of modern living, and again, they're timeless. If you gave everyone a cell phone in Twin Peaks, the original, you wouldn't know that it was from the 90s.
No, I think like if you watched it onwards from when it came out on the gold box set remastered, and that was still only on DVD, the quality of it, the picture and everything about it and the sound was just so high that it didn't look like anything from that time. Like if you compare the visuals of, say, the X-Files, it's just not in the same league as Twin Peaks. It's I think the thing with the new show is as well, from bearing in mind that they had Peter Deming do the cinematography and everything, they made sure that it had a very digital look. You know, they didn't want it to look sort of you know, it's not like he came in and started making it the same look as, say, Lost Highway or even Mulholland Drive, you know, with that sort of depth of field and things like that. It's like everything in the shot was pretty much within the same range of focus and everything. And it gave it this sort of just digital modernness feel that I would even compare to Top Gun Maverick, which I saw the other day again, and I've mentioned to you, strangely enough. You know, but this kind of thing is the kind of thing that people like Twin Perfect, for instance, they don't really go into that much, but it's about the actual look and feel and materiality of what we're given. And none of this is a mistake. For instance, in part 8 of The Return, you know, we have the whole black and white episode, and there's a shot even when outside of the convenience store gas station, all of the I couldn't call them bums. The woodsman type characters are moving all around in a sort of scattershot fashion, almost like ants. Someone described it like that. And at one point, the camera sort of moves in such a way that you can sort of see the interior. It looks like the interior of a camera lens, very briefly, which is very similar to the look actually when Cooper's in the glass box and it goes and it's got those different, especially, you know, like with the things they have on the edges of cameras, those lens aspects that are sort of, I don't know if they're partly foreshadowing or whatever the exact usage of them, but that's pretty interesting when you think about part 8 and how we're supposed to be watching this all and thinking this is based on a real event, as in, you know, the atomic bomb explosion. But then, of course, it goes into all these other areas that are clearly, you know, are in a different spiritual realm of some sort. It's not just documentary footage. But perhaps. But the fact that you get that aspect, that there is a camera lens in there somewhere filming all this stuff, including images of, there are brief images that Lynch filmed back in his early days where he actually put some of his own sperm and filmed it with a close-up lens, obviously, or whatever. Like, it's very interesting to know what's going off with all this. You know, it's this idea, I think, with The Return, it's almost everything could be interpreted as a tall tale, you know, as something like, say you're meditating and you're just thinking up all these crazy ideas, but you're just letting them go past you, like not hanging on to them, just as if you're dreaming a bit, maybe. And that's how it is. It's like, and suddenly there's something in there in the midst of it all, filming to say this is real in some way. Or is it somebody actually dreaming of what they're seeing, their spiritual dream experience as being real somehow, as in it's being filmed? Someone's filming my dream. I think that's a possibility.
I think lenses are used a lot in Twin Peaks, especially in The Return. Like, whether it be the shape of a camera that we now identify as the shape of a camera, the box with the hard angle triangle going into it, or the fact that we have various metaphors for being perceived. Again, like when Lynch is doing that scene at the cafe, and she's looking past, and then she looks directly at the camera. As art goes, the artist is trying to get you to think about various things, and lenses are eyes or perception. Or
do you mean Norma looking at the camera? Or?
No, what's her name? The wife, the famous actress. They're at his the cafe outside of the place where he put on the art in real life, and she looks past him.
Oh, Monica Bellucci, yeah.
Bellucci, course, yeah, thank you. That's one. Yeah, I couldn't remember.
We have a major fan. I'll just give a shout out to Gary North, who he actually sent me a film of hers called Melina, very kindly of him. And he actually said, though, it doesn't make any sense. Why did they only have that one scene with her? Like, he's a major fan of hers. She's in a play about Onassis or Maria Callas, and he went to see that recently. And why did they not film more with her? So, but all we know is they could have filmed more, but it just isn't in the show. So, you know, it's
again, we all want a Josie. We all want different things, but I think.
Well, did you notice actually when she's sitting there like this, doing this with her fingers, and she looks like she's doing two Twin Peaks with her fingers.
Yeah, it's again,
which is like, what? I mean, I would have never normally noticed. I probably did notice it, but only just on a subconscious level, because I suppose there's no reason not to notice that kind of thing, especially after Gordon mentions about the spiritual mound and all this kind of thing so there's a lot of subliminal stuff in The Return.
Yeah, and I think that's again what art is. You know, we're meant to receive this energy, and I get what you're saying about Twin Perfect. You know, that regurgitating and even speaking about it is potentially doing harm. But I think Twin Perfect and a lot of people in this world, and you and I are involved. We are talking about Twin Peaks. We are breaking the rules. If David Lynch were here, he'd be slapping both of us because we are not explaining, but we're talking about it. And according to him, the film said everything. You don't need it. There's nothing else to say. But we all love it because it means various things to us. Some of the biggest supporters of the band when they were young, like yourself, needed Twin Peaks to help them through the darkest moments of their lives. Was the moment already dark? Yep. Was Twin Peaks the healing light? Somehow, and still is to this day. And many people, and that's kind of the beauty that I've found in this community, is that a lot of people come from brokenness or suffering or trauma, and this community has been like, we're all welcome. It's been hard, especially even the past 3 years. We've all lost various family members, friends, communities, businesses, and it isn't.
Yeah, I think even if people hadn't. Even if some people hadn't lost anyone actually close to them, I think just the overall effect of it on people mentally is something that is, you know, it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing, or even once in 100 years or more. So, in fact, when you mention this kind of area, it just makes me think. I hope it's okay to just mention sometimes, like since I've been doing this for 5 years, of course, or more now, these videos and responding to just all sorts of things. But we always bring up Twin Peaks: The Return and Lynch stuff. So, there's one person, Millie, actually, who was in the chat recently, and she was saying how she felt flat after. Now she feels flat after certain things about The Return. I can't remember exactly what she was referring to. Probably like the ending, or just. I think she had issues with specifically the way that Ray Wise was only featured very briefly and things like that. And I, for me, I would just say that I think the flatness that she's describing is partly related to, when they finished The Return, I genuinely thought that there would be an announcement within coming months that there was going to be something following on from that. Just
WISTERIA.
from the nature of the ending. Like, I didn't know of any idea of a name or anything like that. But
right.
Yeah, I just thought there would be something coming from it, however related, like it could literally be Carrie Page and Dale Cooper doing a musical, something like this. I mean, anything's possible in this. But, the thing is, I do I'm kind of past that part of where I think any idea that people think that anybody's going to be doing something which is going to make them feel all warm and fuzzy with Lynch, I kind of think that's not really going to happen, especially just consider how Lynch is and then think of Inland Empire, for instance. But bearing that in mind, I do think that the ending of Inland Empire is a bit more warm and fuzzy than the ending of The Return. So, because we've got people singing and dancing, there's a monkey there, I mean, what more do you want? Whereas the ending of The Return, I mean, it is very genuinely, and I think sincerely, it literally is leaving us in a deep space low, that kind of thing. But that in itself, I think for Lynch, that's like a beautiful thing in itself, like to be in that and to just occupy that, that feeling of, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what all these emotions are and things, but Yeah.
What was the ending of season 2? We all hold that in pretty high regard. I would like to believe.
I think the thing is, yes, those that people, as just mentioned, and I hope Millie doesn't mind me mentioning here, the idea of flatness. I think that would have left her with similarly a feeling of flatness, but also it would have given her a sense of alarm. Whereas the ending of The Return, it didn't end with Richard Cooper smashing his head into a street sign.
No. What I'm saying, I guess, is that we as humans have every right to claim ownership to a fandom, right? Like, this means this to me, and I feel like it didn't turn out my way. That's true. You're right. However, this is what we got. What I think the director is asking you to do with art is look inward. Right? What is the flatness and why?
I think the thing with The Return is it goes so high and then also so low in its extremes between, for instance, Tim Roth and Lynch is saying, do it like when you're being shot, do it like Elvis, going like when you think of that as a scene, and then it's actually relatively close in the entire thing to the ending where Cooper and Laura, mind my use of names there, are sort of in this whole other incredibly melancholy feeling world. We don't really know if they're even in Twin Peaks. Just like those two extremes, those scenes, it's like we've never seen something quite like that in Twin Peaks before. So
I think the pacing of The Return, every aspect of The Return was purposely different. And in that, again, in the scenes, the way things are shot, the way things move, way different from the original series. Definitely not Fire Walk with Me. Are we in a different world, especially at the end? Questionable. I noticed that most of the time we're in Twin Peaks, we're getting brands that don't exist in this world. But once they crossed over, there was a Valero, there were brands that we were familiar with. There's a way of looking at it there and looking at the details. But again, Lynch, I think, shows it to us very cleanly, obviously.
We get also like North Bend on But before we even crossed over, we had like North Bend Motors on the sign for the place where Mike is working. So
Right.
it's like we're in a kind of, we're not really in the true Twin Peaks. We're in the real Twin Peaks. We're in the unreal Twin Peaks, which is a combination of both just the idea of the double R being like double R to go. When I first heard of that, I was like, this is ridiculous. You can't do that at the double R. You have to go in there and eat stuff. You can't just be wandering around with it everywhere.
And then the pandemic happened.
Well, yeah.
So, again, like one of the things that I point out to people recently, if you watch episode 8 and you're a real big fan, slow down the mother scene. If you look at those floating baubles, they kind of look like a spike protein. Did Lynch have foreseen knowledge that it was coming? No. Was he an artist? Yes. Was he reading the wind? Yes.
These things are always in the news, though, aren't they? I mean, I think there's always been viruses going around, especially in the Far East, where, we all know about Japanese people and other, Chinese maybe, etc. They're very much far more accustomed to wearing masks ordinarily. For them, it's just sort of like a polite thing, partly, and politeness. And, well, I will say that 25 Watered Me and Twin Peaks were incredibly popular in Japan, but
yeah.
They're basically very sensible people, whereas Western people are generally like, I ain't wearing one of those masks. That's my impression of one of my neighbors, by the way.
Trust me, I get plenty of that here. What I guess I'm saying is that when the return was worked on and released, it was pre-coronavirus.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Could this artist have pulled an image of a spike protein from the air? Yes. Could this artist have pulled an image of a spike protein from their research as being a student that studied bodies and all sorts of things in their history? Potentially, yes. And again, it's not like Lynch actually animated those orbs. He handed that off to a production studio, but he told them what he wanted it to look like. And it was in this dream in his mind. And we end up getting that dream. Now, all these years later, we're watching and we're like, wait a minute. Is that what I think it is? And that's kind of the beauty of all of this. I think that it's timeless, and I think we'll be talking about it quite honestly forever. And that is, even if we don't get a season 4 or anything else, even if Lynch never makes another film, he's given us the key to understanding his art, a continuum of Hollywood and what he holds in the highest regard, not just movies or TV, but again, film, and that he holds in the highest regard. If you've Sunset Boulevard, just to bring it up, and knowing that that's something so important to him, one of the most important scenes for me as a musician and sound engineer is when this gentleman, this musician, walks into this mansion. And if you look at the subtitles, thank God for subtitles, it says, "Wind plays through the reeds." So like they show the organ, and it's the exact sound Lynch has used for the wind and the darkness and the bass in all of his films. He's probably recreated it his own way and resynthesized it. But it's one of those things, like being able to trace their steps and know how they got there. It's mind-blowing, but then to watch him do it himself, it's like, congratulations. You did something that we all enjoy and we love, and it's all, nothing is new under the sun. No word that can't be said, no song that can't be sung. John Lennon did it pretty well, but we are all still reaching. We are all still trying to play with this energy, this thing called art. And we haven't invented new colors yet. We haven't reimagined music. We've got ChatGPT or whatever, ChatGPT, trying to eliminate our creativity. But I think if we were to put a little bit more time into the creative arts, and instead of putting it into the lofty ideals of only they can, I think we are all given this access to art and creativity, intuition that Lynch really favors. And I think Twin Peaks is kind of that permission slip for a lot of us. Like, hey, you're a little weird, you've had a hard time, enjoy this, but then make your own.
Yeah. And I remember this interview that someone alerted me to. It was obviously not so much of a new one, and it just said about an interviewer going into Lynch's home and saying that he had shelves full of VHS tapes, and yet when he's asked usually about what movies have you seen and stuff like this, he'll often say, I don't really go and see many other people's movies because I start worrying about the director, and it makes it difficult for me to digest my popcorn. But the reality is, like, if you look at that Lynch Oz film documentary, I watched that. It just shows how intently Lynch has been affected by certain films like that, and Sunset Boulevard, and then no doubt, many others. But he doesn't want to do an interview where he just says, okay, now, because he probably just thinks Scorsese's done this, and in a way it's just removing the magic. If he just says, okay, yeah, let's just talk about this film that was a big influence on me then, and the things in it that really struck me, because in a way it's a bit like just saying to a painter, like, give me every idea you had in your head whilst you were doing this painting, and sort of it basically just strips everything down to the building blocks rather than the end product, which is Lynch's own thing. Like, it's not like he just nicked that sound from. It's quite funny, whereas there's a lot of people on Twitter, etc., and they will say, oh, look at this image from Magritte or whatever, and then look at this one of Cooper looking in the mirror. It's like, Lynch stole it, and it's it's not like Lynch goes through the Wizard of Oz and goes, yeah, okay, I'm just going to use that golden orb bit and then just put that straight in Twin Peaks: The Return with no thinking. It's got to have some kind of meaning, like the fact that we didn't get golden orbs in earlier Twin Peaks, and then we get the sort of inverse of golden orb, as in a burnt meteorite with questionable CGI of Bob saying about his. I mean, that's all very much something which is pretty much, deliberate. There's no attempt to make it any better or any worse. It's just, who we would have guessed that kind of stuff. And so I can understand why some people might have felt a bit, as they describe it, flat, because they were basically being handed something which was totally unexpected, and then they just didn't know how to process it, I suppose.
Amen.
Because in a strange way, the Bob thing is, Bob was like the ultimate villain. Although I kind of felt, even by the end of Firewalk with Me, that it was sort of like, how do we keep Bob scary, in a way? And I think Mr. C was scary enough in his own way, within the sort of feeling of this kind of ultra real gangster world. But you can't, for one thing, it would have seemed crazy to have brought Bob more into the whole thing when Frank Silver's no longer around.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was about something even bigger than just the idea of Killer Bob anyway. And that's probably why Leyland wasn't brought into it, because I think Lynch would have gone, oh no, I'm not going to have Leyland just coming up and appearing like an apparition standing in the trees, or, you'd have to think very specifically how to make something with Leyland work, wouldn't you?
I think he actually did it so tastefully and so well. There's multiple ways of looking at how that went. Again, especially if you read the books, the whole thing, only seeing Leland and saying, find Laura. Okay. So like the last we saw Doppel Leland, who said, I didn't kill anybody, who again is lying because he's evil. And that's obvious.
Yeah, I think
right?
this is basically
No.
good.
I get it. What we
I think it's the benevolent side of Leyland, where he thinks that Laura went missing genuinely.
Hold on.
Well,
maybe not. If in that world, Bob, and now see, I don't know if you listened to my podcast that I did, but I'm of the belief that Sarah Palmer, if you want to call her Judy Fine, is the big bad, has been the big bad the entire time, and we all get caught up on Leland. Okay.
Well, I think there'll be some people who will definitely find this thought interesting because they've mentioned the same thing. What is the name of your podcast then?
Oh, I was on the Creamed Corn podcast, and yeah, we spoke about Judy. It was supposed to be a Sarah Palmer episode, but it went into what I think Sarah Palmer really is and who she is. And this comes from personal trauma and experience of abuse myself from trusted individuals. So I have a particular lens that I'm viewing this from, and that I can see very plain as day now as an adult. Like, oh my God. But like Fire Walk with Me, I think it's in the scene. It might have been a missing piece, but when Sarah is like, where's that sweater? And she's wearing it, and then she goes and has a cry. This is abuse. This is straight up narcissistic abuse. Textbook 101. But as a child, you're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with my parent. I would be a terrible person if I don't help them. Like, it doesn't matter anything. Nothing matters. I have to be a good kid. And they just show it over and over and over again. Getting to Leland in the return, said, find Laura. So in my mind, according to the book, Leland kills himself, right? Because Laura goes missing. In my kind of headcanon, even if Cooper would have never intervened and Laura could have gotten away with her 10 grand, she probably would have headed to Hollywood, ? Maybe that's what one of those other Lynch films could have been about. And maybe that's why we got it. But that Leland in the return, in the Red Room, who does not have bleach white hair, right? Died naturally, maybe. No. Says find Laura because Bob left.
Well, they do have a proper salon in the Black Lodge, so
right. But Bob is no longer in that. The good Leland died and somehow ended up in the lodge because, of course, he was touched by Bob. But this wasn't Doppel Leland. This was real Leland. And he wanted Cooper to find Laura because as far as that's the father right there. The actual human being father who cared about his daughter is stuck in the Red Room, and he can't do anything about it. And he knows he would like the good guy to go find her because, hey, maybe you can fix this. Maybe by finding her, this saves her. Right? Do we know that by trying to fix the past that we might actually be undoing our good? Do we honestly think sitting in a room under the covers, thinking for 5 hours straight, not eating, not going to the bathroom, sweating and just being miserable and crying about our first love that left us is a good thing? I mean, don't get me wrong, we all have to process things differently, but the minute that you do this for 10 days straight, 20 days straight, it's probably pretty unhealthy, right? So we have these things to process, and this experience with Leland is something that clearly it messed with him to such a degree. We get innocent Leland, and Cooper has to go and try to do quote unquote the right thing. We are all still again debating, did they do the right thing? Do we feel bad? Well, yeah. That's quite literally the point of the art. We were meant to feel something. Because hell, you could put a Marvel movie on and then watch your phone at the same time. Hell, grab a tablet. We'll watch 3 screens and not pay attention to anything. But Twin Peaks, if you actually watch it, makes you feel something. And you are responsible with your feelings and your reactions. And that's kind of modern psychology, thank God. And we are in this place. Again, the ending and spoken secrets. Let's get into it. We can debate whether it be the minutia, the cameras, the lenses, the actors, the time of day, the day it was filmed, the day it was released, and the network and the people involved, the sound engineers. It's all nothing. It's all nothing compared to what did it make you feel. Now, can you put that into words? We as the community, I know, we eat that stuff up. Whether it be somebody saying, hey, ominous whooshing, 25 years later, this is how I still feel about Twin Peaks. People buy that book. Scott Ryan is still writing about Twin Peaks, and we're still buying it. Blue Rose Magazine is still pretty successful. And I think it's going to be forever. It's not going anywhere. And there are people who, like us, or like Scott Ryan or others, that want to delve into the depth here the actress who ran away screaming, who we've never seen before. We got to hear her recently. That's amazing. You know, there's a lot of people that are going to lose their mind because we are all thinking about it. Is she going to give us the answer to the mystery? No. But that's the point. If you ask Lynch to explain anything, he will say no. And so I'm so glad for that, you know, because we get to write, we get to have our world that we can dive into, go into that dream, soak in it, and then come back and say, yes, this is how I feel. This is what it made me feel. This is my reaction to this art. Does anybody else get this? And then you're getting people saying like, yes, I was traumatized. Oh my gosh, I had a hard time with the ending. It took me 2 months. I had to process it. And I realized this about myself. And that might help somebody else. And that's kind of art. You know, it's like you put it out in the world, people react, people then get inspired to make their own thing, whether it be a post, a picture, a piece of art, a film, so on. And we happen to be in that section of being inspired and releasing music by this piece of art.
Yeah, or like Voltaire Lynch, as he calls himself on here, he is actually he claims anyway that he's a qualified attorney in Orange County. And he says that, you know, one of the greatest things for him is collecting video machines. He's now got up to 20, and he's got 20 copies, you know, of Firewalk with Me, and he can put them all on simultaneously. But no, we do genuinely look a lot of these pages where people collect videos and things. But the one thing I wanted to question, I didn't quite understand what you meant about somebody being very upset about somebody leaving them, like in a relationship, and you were referring to Leyland somehow. I mean, I can't understand what you were referring to it with.
Okay, sorry. I diverted a little bit. First of all, Judy and Sarah, big thing, right? Were they bound? Was Bob and Judy, i.e. Leland and Sarah, bound to each other, right? Depending on your read of some of this, there is, in Mark Frost's book, this idea of the great evil coming to create a union, and that would create the end of all time, right? And so if two things, let me come back to the relationship thing, but basically we never get to see Laura born, right? We're in a film, we're watching this piece of art, but we are meant to believe that they are her parents and that they made her, right? And I think that they had the plan, again, if Bob got to actually consume and become Laura, then they might have taken over the world in whatever capacity you can see that is. But we get Laura rejecting that opportunity. We get what we call Twin Peaks. As far as the relationship and stuff, one of the things our music is talking about just relationships in general, because we all have them. But as far as Leland and Sarah, there was a relationship there. Let's cut Laura out of it and whatever garmonbozia they were harvesting from her on the daily. Because again, under the fingernails, go wash your hands, the sweater, these people were making her life hell. Okay. And we never see Sarah eat ever. Smoke, yes. Drink, maybe once, but we never actually see her eat. And as far as I'm concerned, that's as demonic as it gets. These people tortured the hell out of this woman, and so much that she literally ran as far and as fast as she could, as hard as she could. Drugs, who cares? Let's do it. Men, I need 10 grand. I need to get the hell out of here. Whatever works. And in this world, in our world, there are things that work. And there are people who will do things to escape the relationship they have found themselves in, whether that be birth parents, love connections. There was a lot of darkness during the pandemic as well, of people that sadly got stuck together, and a lot of loss, again, in many ways that we could talk about. But this experience in the Red Room,
that's something really interesting, actually. I did, even though I live in a relatively kind of pleasant area, I did notice some people who maybe, I mean, this is not anything related to even people and how much money they have, but you know that when people are struggling, and it just reminded me of like Becky and Stephen in The Return, and they were sort of dressing in this kind of like during the cold weather, like really overly dressed, and just
In
sort
the
of they
Pacific
look.
Northwest, that's how you get warm.
Yeah, but around here it was even exaggerated, and they were just getting scruffier and scruffier, and it was sort of. I totally understand though. People were just basically surviving day to day, but then these people were sometimes like starting families and stuff in that kind of situation. And you just think, in what you're describing is like you're bringing out of the realistic aspects of Twin Peaks, which were always there in the original show. You're sort of giving it this extra layer of something strange spiritual aspects or supernatural aspects. Like the thing with Leyland, I would just ask though, it's not like anybody forced him to be raping his own daughter, for instance, or to be,
See again, Bob. Right.
So
Bob.
I mean, he did say when he was in the train car, like, I thought you always knew it was me.
So then again, we have this belief that Bob Leland can like flicker, like Bob is in control, but every once in a while, like Leland cries. Leland's like, I told you not to have me do this, like.
Yeah, but the fact that he wants his own daughter to think that he was the one, he almost thought that like maybe the lack of love that was between him and Sarah was being expressed through him and his daughter. And
so yeah, I cannot see it through the physical lens. I can't. I refuse. Okay. Because there's way more going on, especially in The Return. Now, again, this is maybe our dream. Maybe we want to put the darkness on Sarah. She was always evil. How could she have let that happen in her house? She knew the whole time. It's the fans' fault. So like it's just that whole thing. To go all the way back. Why is Leland in the Red Room? Because that's the Leland that's free. He isn't bound by Judy. He isn't bound by Bob. However, he is stuck in limbo. He is stuck in the Red Room. This might be hell. This might be heaven. We don't know what version we want to discuss. But Leland still loved his daughter, and that Leland was still very sorry.
The sorrow and that what you're describing, his feeling of regret and all of that kind of side of things, almost had reduced him into this like a sullen teenager, like the way he was sitting in the chair, sort of all reproachful. Yeah.
Let's again, like the Leland that died in the jail cell was the closest we ever get to seeing him in the original series, I would like to believe. Let's just be honest here. How often do we get to see actual last breaths on screen? We got to see that, and we got Cooper ushering him into the light. How often do we see this with compassion to somebody that did the evil that they did? There are spiritual elements interwoven constantly, and to ignore them would be cutting out a leg, or an arm of something that is living and alive. So I think, yeah, Judy and Bob were trying to accomplish this thing. And this is where it gets really fun, is Cooper actually there? Because technically, there's a Bob orb in Carrie Page's little house, right? The Cooper that we're dealing with is not very happy or lucky go. And why would he have such an obsession to bring her back to the Palmer house, right? Well, if this is maybe Bob, if this is bad Cooper, because how have we always ended season of Twin Peaks? There's always been bad Cooper all of a sudden. What if we failed, right? And what if what we thought was the good ending, it isn't? There is no good ending. We have not succeeded yet. We have not looked ourselves in the mirror.
Because when the sort of whole Mr. C thing, it sort of peters out throughout the season to where people are kind of thinking, what is this? Like, is he really a villain, or is he just sort of, he's lacking any goals anymore? And then anyway, when he is on fire in that shot at the start of this episode 18, it's like the flames are coming off him, but he's not actually burning. So therefore, in a way, he's just in stasis or whatever. Like you can't kill Mr. C. He's just a part of this supernatural reality or whatever, you know.
But he had an obsession with Judy, right?
This is what I want. Yeah.
Why would Cooper, like, again, this is an FBI agent. He could go into an office. He could rob a bank. Cooper could do anything in his life with his power and ability. Why would this person drive this person multiple states to deliver them to their mother? This doesn't make any sense. No, you set up protective services, or you get them set up in a new place, like she was already set up in a new place. And why was she not perturbed by being greeted by FBI agents? This was like, oh yeah, did you take care of it? Who else have you been talking to from the FBI? Why is there a Bob orb in your living room? You know, we'll just.
Do you mean in the man's stomach?
Yeah.
That guy looked like sort of a very similar to Mr. C or someone, you know.
Well, again, slicked back hair. I think he had a goatee. His hands were slightly raised, and that was in the original series. You know, and again, we don't see Carrie Page packing. Like, where's her pistol? Where's her gun? Where's her rifle that accomplished that? I think there might have actually been a weapon on the ground in that shot where Cooper's looking around.
What do you mean about the hand slightly raised?
Yeah, he's like sitting in the chair and his hands are slightly raised, just like.
Yeah, I've noticed that, but
that was a nod to the original series with what's her name, who went across state lines. Ronette, yeah, and when she's doing that's a whole very important and pivotal moment in the first season.
That's really interesting, actually, because this is something I was discussing with Cameron. You know, we had a call yesterday about a couple of things, and you know, I was just saying, when you look back on Twin Peaks and how powerful that scene at the end of the opener of the second season was. I remember going outside and it was coming into the summer and stuff, and I was sort of just taking a breath of fresh air and everything. And my dad was like, "Are you okay?" And I was just sort of like, you know, that end of the episode showing Ronette's vision of what happened. Even though, as Cameron mentioned to me, she was pushed out, as it showed in Firewalk with Me. But of course, it doesn't matter. She could just be envisioning something, whatever. But the sheer power and the horror of that scene, so only literally like a year later or something, they were shooting the film, and they had to basically recreate that whole scene. And it just makes you think, like, that's a crazy small amount of time for them to just basically shoot the same thing twice. And it, you know, I do strongly believe, like, how in Firewalk with Me, it was getting to the point, even through the ending of, actually, it probably didn't help, particularly the ending of certain episodes where Michael Jansen was dancing on the bed, and then Bob appeared and said, "Q, what happened to Josie?" I always found that like a bit of a lackluster Bob vision. And I really think that Lynch and Bob Engels and everybody had an immense difficulty on their hands with creating that sort of fear element from Bob in Firewalk with Me. I mean, he did it particularly well, but it was a different kind of element where we went down Bob's throat, basically. And then the ending, though, of course, it took it into a whole different sort of sphere with the angels and all that. And maybe I could just ask you briefly what you thought of that. Did you like bringing in the angels and that sort of religious iconography into Twin Peaks?
So yeah, two things. There's a comment that I want to address here shortly. But number one, I was raised Catholic. I was devout. I was headed towards the priesthood, actually. So I've done some research, and I understand not only biblical angels with wings and eyeballs and all that stuff, but I understand the use and the archetype that we all associate them with. I think Lynch, again, was playing with archetypes. I think whether you want to believe that Laura is being shown Twin Peaks, the TV show, at the end, and she's laughing at the absolute ridiculousness of her existence being a character in a show, much like the ending of Inland Empire. Um, you can perceive it that way. The angel going away and then coming back. Now that's, again, it really hits if that piece from The Missing Pieces was in the show, in the movie, where he talks about, Laura, your angel's going to come away, and he had this poem like set up. Let's go real deep on that. Why is a doctor allowing a very beautiful underage girl to smoke in his house? Because it's his daughter's friend, right? These people, just as much as her parents, knew she was in trouble. Did they do anything? Nope. They all looked the other way. They wanted to return to the 1950s. How much did we hear that over the past decade? How many people want to make something great again? But let's ignore the pain and suffering of the people who are really hurting. So to address Mr. Phantom Cooper, I am not explaining away the abuse of any living or dead real human being. And it's hilarious. But number two, we are talking about a piece of art that is known as Twin Peaks, and it is able to be viewed from any and every lens. You can believe that Laura Palmer's a real person. You can believe that she's a fictional device. Whichever color of the chromatic scale that you pick, you are more than welcome to it. I am not explaining away abuse of anyone. I am putting focus on these characters which happen to exist, which is not only Leland and Sarah, but whatever is inside them. Now we can talk about Albert and what is Bob and is it the evil that men do? Have you ever done evil? Are you a decent person? Are you always good? Like, can you explain it away? Oh, I have this mental illness, or I wasn't paying attention and I ran over somebody, or there's all these various degrees of personal responsibility. And I think Twin Peaks is giving us a lot of opportunity to examine ourselves. This entity.
Well, it's like with it's with the whole, going into the woods and everything, or looking at as Hawke describes it, it's the intent behind the fire. And like, say, if you go off and, I believe Josh in the chat, who's a well-known musician from Lancashire with his band Trio, he was involved in a multiple collision which ended up with 7 people in traction and at least 20 dead. But none of that was his fault, because he was just taking a lot of music equipment across town whilst listening to Bad to the Bone. That's all. So there was no intent, or obviously that's not so serious. That didn't happen. But, if people crash their car into somebody, I wouldn't class that as evil unless they do it intentionally, so.
Right. But if you are drunk and you aren't paying attention, you see where the intention starts to get, like, all of that just starts to fall away really quick when you aren't like aware.
Well, there's that aspect of, I think that both, this is most definitely evident, and I believe it, that like in any relationship, especially, everybody has to be responsible. And with Sarah and Leyland, they weren't. Like Leyland was giving her warm milk with something in it, and then this is sort of shown in a different way, in the innocent light, with the the elderly waiter bringing Cooper the milk. But the fact that she just drank it, though, shows that there was an intent there on her part and his, obviously, and they were both in on it, basically. I don't think that Sarah was such a weak person or weak woman that she had no ability to not drink it, for instance. I know he was standing there basically holding it for her and everything, but it suggested that, there was an unwillingness with Sarah to break out of this cycle. So,
yeah, again, we see glimpses of the human, right? I think in the return, Sarah is gone. There is no Sarah left, and that's okay, because it's in our house now. It's completely consumed her. With it's hard. Again, we can take them very literally, or we can take them as this entity. It's again, no one's arresting Sarah, are they? No,
No, I mean,
clapping her in irons and throwing her away and throwing away the key.
I think Hawk senses there's something wrong, and many people have joked that Hawk's going to the house propositioning her in the return. But I think there's an element of that you could pick up on but that's only in a sort of a dark light. There is that factor that both Hawk and Sarah are lonely people. And, maybe they'd be a great couple or something. But on the other hand, when you look at what Sarah was up to and when she started smashing that picture of Laura, I mean, she was really hitting the depths, wasn't she? She was really not in a good state. So.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I would think Hawk that would go hang out with the log lady before he hung out with Sarah, but at the same time, Hawk is a busy guy,
Yeah, that would be a bizarre combination of.
Yeah, and it's again, this is the mystery, and that's why we're still talking about it. And that's kind of the beauty of it, Did Sarah do it willingly? It's hard to say, but I think if you were to honestly, interview a murderer, interview a child abuser, I will guarantee not only will they have excuses, but they will have justifications. And you could say,
of course.
How many interviews did we give Marilyn Manson? And every single time they'd come back and they'd be like, he's possessed. Oh my gosh, the demon's inside. Well, now we're here in 2023. Are we still saying that? Well, no, mental health. And we've got all the words and every book and everything. If you want to look at it that way, yes, but there is stuff that we are still putting words to, and it's darkness, and we don't like it, and it makes us feel uncomfortable. And that Twin Peaks does that. They shove our face in it like a pie. The guy in the return who has his mouth open and bleeding.
Oh yeah, right.
Why are we looking at this? Why are we meant to see somebody parroting the words that we're seeing on screen? Does it make us feel uncomfortable? Hell yes. Success. You nailed it. But why? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Is it because there's a human being in pain in front of me and I can't reach out? Is it because it makes me remember a previous injury to the mouth? All of the things. It's art, and we are meant to digest and have interactions internally as to why it means anything to us, why it makes us feel anything. Again, Marvel films exist, our cell phones exist. You could pick up the paper, I guess, if that still is around. You could pick up any distraction you want. But this thing that we are still talking about 25 years later and then some has made an emotional impact that we can't explain, and that we are desperately trying to, because it made us feel something that there are very few words for.
And are you looking forward to performing and your gig basically at the Twin Peaks days in the real Twin Peaks? I can only imagine that they've called it that in case some people try and turn up in the Twin Peaks, which is the one with the Valero, go that way, and you can get there overnight from Texas. It's
right.
And they're more in North Bend or somewhere, because Richard and Carrie seem to go across the bridge and it says North Bend there. So they're not really even they're in Everett anyway. So that's not Twin Peaks.
Yeah. Again, like if those of us who have made the pilgrimage then know, like, oh, this is this filming location. That's where that is. And we'll stop for the double R. And but if you've never been, it's kind of like Lynch's analogy to a donut. This is a donut. It's sweet, it's tasty, it's beautiful. If you've never had a donut, it doesn't matter what words I use, I can't describe the donut to you. So most people will watch Twin Peaks and put it on the shelf, and that'll be the experience. Some of us want a little bit more, and we want to go a little deeper. And sometimes we want to go to the actual place. Now, I live in a town that has the actual house from Twilight. Uh, People come from all over town or all over the world actually just to hang out, and that's like an Airbnb now. This town is actually also known for Halloween Town, the Disney film. And so when Halloween October arrives, people from all over the world flock to this little town to take photos and be involved in this little community that they've created. And Twin Peaks has that. It isn't clean and simple as a Debbie Reynolds film by Disney, by no means, but the impact is, I would say, more. Just easily and gently say more. It still has a hardcore cult following. We still have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that are clamoring for anything Peaks. We know we're never going to get another season, but what if a band existed in that world? What if there was a band on tour and the veil got a little thin between North Bend and Twin Peaks? And that's what we're talking about on Twin Peaks Day 224. We will be playing two shows, two dinner shows inside Tweeds or the Double R. And that's 3 and 5 o'clock. And then we are playing a very special after party following a showing of Fire Walk with Me. Excited? Yes, I try my best to hold my excitement till day of, but I got to be honest, this is as big to us as playing a sold out 500 person show in Portland or a sold out 18 person show inside the Palmer House like we did last summer. We are absolutely enamored that the community has accepted us, that they want what we have, and that they are accepting and willing to support us. We were able to release a vinyl record last year through this beautiful community. Again, to be a band that is only 1 year old to a certain degree and is pressing vinyl, touring regionally, and having people go out of their way to intentionally listen, not just show up in a bar and drink and have a band in the background. This is, as many would call it, like success. This is a form of making it. And it takes some people 10, 15, 20 years to get to this point. We asked the universe, if you want to say it that way. We put this vibration out there. We were very inspired by the sound, and we just so happened to be in this small town and had one of the biggest Twin Peaks fans in the world in this small town who saw us and encouraged us every step of the way. This thing for Twin Peaks Day is going to be incredible. It's international. I don't know about names and this and that. Once upon a time, it was called Steeplejack Reunion, and it was kind of mostly for locals, but there was celebrities that were brought in, and that really got kind of big. COVID happened, and now we're all starting again, and we're all trying to find our place in this. And I think, whether it be they're celebrities or stars or just a space for the community to gather, that's really great. And it's just been nothing but like a dream come true, being able to go up there, say, hey, we're doing this. Oh yeah, we've already seen your music. We love what you're doing. Well, we have stickers for you. Well, we want you to play a gig. So it's all like, again, I can't help but say it just feels like a dream come true, because I've been playing music professionally for almost 20 years. And though things have been difficult in certain moments, in some ways, things have never been easier. Having a community that accepted us and brought us in, and gave us a place to create and dream our dream it's unheard of in this modern world, outside of being bankrolled.
Well, we usually have a Sunday show, which I was going to kind of seek into, or I'll end this one first and then do that. But I will just leave the floor open for you. Anything you wanted to say before we wrap this one up, Dustin? And I just want to wish you a lot of luck with everything that goes off at Twin Peaks Days in the real Twin Peaks, because I'm just happy that there are these things going on. Like here in Manchester, there's another one, a Twin Peaks Day thing, with similar things going on, but smaller, obviously. And it just reminds me, I think in 2019, I went to Manchester when we had a Lynch exhibition, and then Christabel performed, and Voltaire on here, he kind of made fun of me not going up to speak to Christabel because it was just such a warm day, and I was a bit nervous about. I was staying on like this canal barge overnight, and so yeah, it was. I really wouldn't have known what to say to her, but I think that the other performers as well really made it worthwhile going because there was some quite unusual stuff.
Yeah, we're trying to be that next project, if you will. Don't get me wrong, Christabel and Rebecca Del Rio are very beloved by the community, but we are trying to. The Chromatics has been disbanded. A lot of bands might not exist or are maybe still existing, but have moved on. The Veils, so on. We are trying to step into that world. We have some opportunities that should be coming up, and internationally, if anybody has any Lynch retrospectives or Twin Peaks events that they'd like us to play 1 to multiple hours, let us know. Please get in touch. We are absolutely available and capable for doing that. To answer just really quickly, Ashton T, do I think that there could ever be a possibility of other directors to work on Twin Peaks? That was a potential for the return, and I'm glad it didn't happen. I don't know. Season 2 was bad enough, quote unquote. I'm just joking. But nonetheless, I would really not want to see a Peaks without Lynch personally. Is it a possibility? Could money make things happen and slap the name on it? It is a possibility. So personal wants and needs versus the possibilities. Take it as you will. As far as signing off, thank you again so much for having me. This has been a really great opportunity to hang out and talk about what I love second most, music being number one, Twin Peaks. It's been a real staple in my life. It has helped me heal and get through a lot of darkness. As far as Wisteria Lodge and Spoken Secrets, it comes out on Twin Peaks Day. I would love everybody to give it a listen. If you would like to download or purchase it on Bandcamp, please do. There is going to be a Bandcamp Friday the first week of March. And so if you would like to really help us out, whenever you buy the album on Bandcamp Friday, 100% of the proceeds go to the artist. Please keep a watch on us on Instagram or the YouTubes. I can send some links to end up in the description of this video. We are posting content. We are setting up regional and international shows as we speak. So keep your eye on us and help us grow so that we can continue providing this particular style of Lynchian-inspired sound. Spoken Secrets is out 224. All the even-numbered tracks are the band tracks. All the odd-numbered tracks are the cinematic tracks. I really hope that you all get a great kick out of it. Let me know what you think. Put it on. Go on the journey. Listen to J.R. Starr and Kimmy Robertson and all that they bring to this special production. Thank you again, James. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Well, thank you for coming on, and very much appreciated. Hopefully, maybe I'll see you at the UK Twin Peaks Fest when that starts again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And if not, I will see you in the trees. So.
Amen.
So thank you very much for coming on, and cheerio for now. See you in the trees.
Cheers.